Welcome, deep divers, to a journey that challenges, well, one of the most fundamental assumptions we often make about success. There's a provocative statement that has always resonated with me. Good is the enemy of great. Think about that for a moment. We often settle for a good job, a good relationship, maybe even a good life. And because it's, good enough, we rarely push beyond that. But what if there's a path, maybe even a proven path, to transcend good and reach for something truly great? This deep dive is our mission today, to unpack the groundbreaking findings from a landmark 5-year research study, a study that set out to answer a really crucial question. Can a good company become a truly great company? And if so, how? And this wasn't just another opinion piece or, collection of anecdotes. It was rigorous, data-driven, like scientists meticulously exploring a black box to understand the true mechanics of sustained performance. And spoiler alert, good to great does happen. And we're going to dig into how they actually did it.
And rigorous is definitely the right word. The research team, they really went through what they called a death march of financial analysis, just sifting through mountains of data to find these companies, the ones that made a sustained leap from just good to truly great. And we're talking organizations that, after their transition point, achieved these cumulative stock returns averaging, well, nearly 7 times the general market over 15 years. Just astonishing.
7 times.
Yeah. To give you some perspective, a company like GE, which everyone thinks of as, a gold standard for leadership, they outperformed the market by less than 3 times over a similar period. Imagine this. If you'd invested $1 in one of these good to great companies back in, say, 1965, by the year 2000, that single dollar could have multiplied almost 500 times.
500 times.
Compared to only about 50 times in the general market. It's a huge, almost unbelievable difference.
Okay, so how do they figure out why? What was the secret sauce?
Well, to uncover why, the researchers didn't just study the success stories. That's key. They meticulously selected comparison companies. These were companies that either failed to make the leap altogether, or maybe they made it for a bit but just couldn't sustain it. And they dug deep. Nearly 6,000 articles, thousands of pages of interview transcripts, processed hundreds of millions of bytes of computer data.
That sounds like a massive undertaking.
Oh, it was Herculean, over a decade of dedicated human research effort. And what's really fascinating, and often gets overlooked, are the dogs that didn't bark, the things they didn't find.
Things that didn't matter.
Exactly. Things we think matter, like those larger-than-life celebrity CEOs, actually negatively correlated with making the leap.
Really? Negatively?
Yep. They also found no systematic link to specific executive compensation plans or even strategy per se. Technology didn't ignite the transformations. It just accelerated momentum once it was there. And big mergers and acquisitions, they rarely initiated the leap to greatness.
It challenges a lot of conventional wisdom.
It really does. It sets the stage for some genuinely surprising insights. And the standard for their findings was incredibly high. Every primary concept we'll talk about today appeared in 100% of the good to great companies.
Every single one.
Every single one. And in less than 30% of the comparison companies. So these aren't just, interesting theories. They're consistently present, actionable principles. They're the core mechanisms.
Okay, so you, our listener, you're getting an incredible shortcut here. You're gaining these profound insights into what truly drives sustained excellence. And these insights, they're applicable not just in big corporations, but really in any organization you're part of, maybe even in your own life. This deep dive isn't just about business. It's about the sort of timeless physics of turning good into great. As we were really digging into this research, one finding in particular just kept jumping out. It felt really provocative, challenging so much of what we think we know about great leaders. It's this idea of level 5 leadership. Now, when you picture a CEO transforming a company, what usually comes to mind? Maybe a charismatic visionary, someone loud, inspiring.
Right, the sort of heroic figure.
Exactly. Well, the core concept of level 5 is actually, it's a paradox.
Yeah.
It's a blend of extreme personal humility with intense professional will. Humility and will. And here's the kicker. This type of leader, found at the helm of every single good to great company during their key transition period.
Every single one. It was a universal finding.
So what's the hidden danger then in seeking out those high-profile celebrity-type figures we often see?
That's a great question, and it gets right to the heart of it. Let's look at Darwin Smith. He became CEO of Kimberly-Clark back in 1971. Now, he was the company's mild-mannered in-house lawyer, honestly. Not many people outside the company even knew his name. Very low profile.
An inside guy. Not flashy.
Not at all. He was so unassuming that when a journalist asked him, describe your management style, He just paused. And after this long silence, he just said, eccentric.
Eccentric, that's it.
That's it. He probably would have preferred to remain completely unknown. But, and this is crucial, don't let that humility fool you. Smith grew up poor, worked his way through college. Even after losing part of a finger on the job, apparently he went right back to class that same evening.
Wow, that's determined.
And then, get this. 2 months into his CEO role, he gets diagnosed with terminal nose and throat cancer, given less than a year to live.
Oh my gosh, right at the start.
Right at the start. He told the board, but basically said, look, I'm not dead yet. He kept his demanding work schedule, commuted for radiation therapy, and ended up living for another 25 years, most of them as CEO.
Incredible. That's the will part, I guess.
That is absolutely the ferocious resolve part of level 5. And his gutsiest move, deciding to sell all of Kimberly-Clark's traditional paper mills.
All of them.
Every single one. Even the mill in Kimberly, Wisconsin, the town it was named after. To thrust the company entirely into consumer products, going head-to-head with giants like Procter & Gamble.
That sounds risky, insane almost.
Widely seen as insane at the time. But he knew the traditional paper business was doomed to mediocrity. He basically forced Kimberly-Clark to become great or, well, perish.
So it sounds like these leaders are almost anti-charismatic in a way.
Yeah.
But how do they inspire people then if they're so unassuming? Is it just their results? Because this loops back to one of those dogs that didn't bark moments you mentioned. This study found that larger-than-life celebrity leaders actually negatively correlated with making the leap from good to great.
That's right. Negatively.
And the comparison companies, the ones that didn't make or sustain the leap, they actually tried hiring outside CEOs nearly 6 times more often than the good to great companies.
6 times more often they were looking for that savior figure from the outside.
Right. Like, consider Stanley Galt at Rubbermaid. Super charismatic, brilliant leader, right?
Well, definitely. Very high profile.
He was basically synonymous with Rubbermaid's success. He even embraced the label sincere tyrant. And apparently in his own comments on leadership, the word I appeared 44 times while we only showed up 16 times.
Tells you something, doesn't it?
It does. Rubbermaid soared under him, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then it disintegrated pretty quickly after he left. There wasn't sustained greatness.
Precisely. That's the key difference. Or think about Al Dunlap, Chainsaw Al at Scott Paper. He loudly boasted about his accomplishments, claiming his turnaround would go down in the annals of American business history. Big talk.
Yeah, I remember him.
But Scott Paper eventually failed, got sold off, not exactly enduring greatness. Then there's Lee Iacocca at Chrysler. Maybe the epitome of the charismatic, almost domineering leader.
Absolutely saved Chrysler, became a national hero for a while.
He did. Imposed his towering personality, achieved a spectacular turnaround in the early 80s, no question. But after he left, having lost focus on the company's core, getting into some undisciplined diversifications, Chrysler declined. Eventually acquired by Daimler-Benz. Iacocca was undoubtedly a tremendous leader, what the research would call a level 4 leader. But he wasn't level 5.
Level 4, but not 5.
Right. His impact, while huge, wasn't enduringly institutionalized. The danger is the company becomes just a reflection of that one individual, not a self-sustaining entity built to last beyond them.
That's a really crucial distinction. So when we dive deeper into these level 5 traits, we see how they fundamentally differ. Like their ambition, it's channeled entirely into the company, not themselves. You mentioned David Maxwell at Fannie Mae earlier. Took over when they were losing $1 million every single business day.
Yeah, an absolute crisis.
Over 9 years, he turns it into this high-performance culture, earning $4 million a day. Amazing turnaround. But then, when he retired right at the top of his game, his pretty substantial retirement package became controversial in Congress.
Right, it was a lot of money, became a political issue.
So Maxwell, in classic level 5 style, writes a letter to his successor offering to forego the entire amount, like $20 million, to protect the company from political fallout.
Wow. Just gave it up.
That's ambition for the company's success, not personal gain. Think about that. How many leaders do you know who would willingly walk away from that kind of personal windfall for the good of the organization?
It's incredibly rare, isn't it? And we were really struck reading the research how these good to great leaders just didn't talk about themselves much. They deflect credit, say things like, oh, I hope I'm not sounding like a big shot, or, well, we were blessed with marvelous people.
Not false modesty, you think?
Doesn't seem like it. It felt genuine. People who worked with them consistently used words like quiet, humble, modest, reserved, self-effacing. Jim Lavicek, who was on the board at Nucor, described Ken Iverson, the CEO, who transformed Nucor from near bankruptcy, as a very modest and humble man.
Well,
Said he lived in a simple house, got his dogs from the local pound, just, normal. They never aspired to be these larger-than-life heroes. They were seemingly ordinary people quietly producing extraordinary results.
and here's the paradox again. This humility is coupled with that unwavering resolve you mentioned, that ferocious, almost stoic determination to do whatever needs to be done. It's definitely not a soft or meek approach.
Not at all. Take Coleman Mockler at Gillette, described as quiet, reserved, a gracious gentleman. But when hostile takeover artists came knocking, guys like Ronald Perelman offering a huge premium, like 44% immediate gain on the stock.
Which, for Mockler himself, would have been millions, right?
Millions personally.
Right.
But he didn't capitulate. He fought them off, endured these brutal proxy fights. His faith in Gillette's long-term future, his sheer professional will, led him to choose the company's greatness over that quick buck.
And he was right, wasn't he?
Absolutely right. Shareholders who stuck with Gillette outperformed those who took the offer and reinvested in the market by 3 times over the next decade. That's a leader who saw the long-term value and had the guts to stand his ground. Another surprising pattern we noticed really interesting was how these good-to-great executives often attributed their success to luck.
Luck? Seriously, after all that effort.
Seriously. Alan Wurtzel of Circuit City, when asked about the top factors in his company's amazing transformation, listed luck as number 1. He said, "We were in a great industry with the wind at our backs."
But wait, their comparison company Silo was in the same industry, right? And they didn't do nearly as well.
Exactly. And when the researchers pressed him on that, Wurtzel still insisted on luck. Joseph F. Coleman III of Philip Morris, similarly, just refused to take personal credit. Attributed his good fortune to great colleagues and successors.
Maybe it's not false modesty, but a way to stay grounded.
I think that's exactly it. It keeps them grounded, stops them from believing their own hype,
Yeah.
They understand there are factors beyond their individual control. It probably fosters a continuous learning mindset, too.
This raises a really important question, though, for you, our listener, and for us. Can level 5 leadership actually be learned? Or are some people just born with it?
Yeah, the nature versus nurture question. The research suggests it's probably a mix. They couldn't offer like a step-by-step guide to becoming level 5. But there are potential factors, things like deep self-reflection, maybe conscious personal development, the influence of mentors or great teachers.
Or maybe big life events.
Possibly. Significant life experiences seemed relevant for some. Derwin Smith's full blossoming seemed to follow his cancer diagnosis. Joe Coleman mentioned being profoundly affected by his World War II experiences. Coleman Mockler had a religious conversion that might have played a role. But then again, other leaders had no obvious big catalyst. They just, led pretty normal lives and somehow ended up embodying level 5 traits.
So we can't definitively say it can be taught.
Not definitively, but the study does indicate that potential level 5 leaders are actually maybe surprisingly highly prevalent. Lots of people have the potential. The challenge isn't really a lack of such individuals, but more knowing what to look for.
Okay, so what do you look for?
Well, the key insight is to look for situations where you see extraordinary results exist, but where no individual steps forth to claim excess credit. That's often where you'll find a potential level 5 leader quietly at work, focusing the spotlight on the company, not themselves.
Interesting. It's like looking for the results first, then the unassuming person behind them.
Exactly. It's a critical component, like finding a key piece of that black box of sustained greatness.
Okay, let's unpack this next finding, because it completely flips a common cliche on its head. One we've probably all heard a million times. People are your most important asset.
Right. Sounds good, doesn't it?
Sounds great, but what if it's fundamentally wrong? Or at least incomplete? The good great leaders operated on this really counterintuitive principle. First who, then what? Meaning they first got the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. And then they figured out where to drive it.
The who comes before the what.
Exactly. They prioritized putting the right team together before setting a grand vision, or even a clear strategy. So, the old adage is wrong. It's not people are your most important asset, it's the right people are.
That's the critical distinction.
So, what does focusing on who first truly unlock for an organization?
That's an excellent question, because this first who approach works for, 3 really crucial reasons. First, if people are on the bench primarily because of who else is on it, because they're committed to the team to excellence, then changing direction, changing the strategy becomes way easier.
Because they're committed to the group,
Yeah.
not just the
Well,
destination.
exactly. If the initial plan changes, they don't jump ship. They recommit to the team and figure out a new path to greatness together. Much more adaptable. Second, if you have the right people on the bus, the whole problem of how to motivate and manage them, it largely disappears.
Because they're self-motivated.
Right. The right people are driven by this inner desire for excellence to be part of something great. They don't need intense management or constant firing up. They manage themselves. Third, and this is critical, if you have the wrong people, it doesn't matter how brilliant your vision or strategy is. You simply will not build a great company.
So great vision, wrong people equals failure.
Pretty much. Great vision without great people is, frankly, irrelevant. The who absolutely determines the what.
It sounds incredibly simple, though, almost like common sense.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's hard to actually do.
It's remarkably difficult to execute consistently. Most executives talk about people decisions, but very few have the discipline to follow through like David Maxwell did at Fannie Mae.
Right back to him, losing $1 million a day.
Every single business day. Billions of dollars of loans underwater. The board was, understandably, clamoring for a strategy, a rescue plan, now.
Yeah, you'd think step one is figure out how to stop the bleeding.
You'd think. But Maxwell's first act, it wasn't announcing some grand vision. It was to interview every single officer on his management team. He sat them down one-on-one and basically said, look, this is going to be incredibly hard. If you don't think you're going to like it, that's totally fine. No hard feelings.
Setting expectations, letting people opt out.
Exactly. He prioritized getting the right team in place, the ones who were up for the fight, before even starting to develop a strategy. Both Maxwell and Dick Cooley, another level 5 leader mentioned, they essentially said the same thing. Look, I don't know exactly where we should take this company yet, but I do know that if I start with the right people, ask them the right questions, and really engage them in vigorous debate, we will find a way to make this company great.
Wow. That's a profound trust in the team, isn't it? Trusting the who will find the what.
It is. And it contrasts so sharply with a pattern they found in the comparison companies. The genius with 1,000 helpers trap.
Genius with 1,000 helpers. What's that?
In these organizations, the company basically becomes a platform for the talents of one extraordinary individual, the genius at the top. The problem is, these towering figures, they rarely build truly great management teams. Why? Because they often don't feel they need one.
They just need people to execute their ideas.
Exactly. An army of capable soldiers to implement their brilliant plans. But what happens when the genius leaves?
Uh-oh. The helpers are lost.
Often, yeah. The company flounders or even collapses because the helpers are lost without their guiding light. Take Eckerd Corporation. Jack Eckerd was apparently a genius at figuring out the what building this huge drugstore empire, but he lacked the ability, or maybe the inclination, to assemble a strong who on his executive team. When he left to pursue politics, the company, without his guiding genius, just stumbled badly. Or Henry Singleton of Teledyne, known as the Sphinx, very brilliant, very controlling. His company's name, Teledyne, literally means force applied at a distance, and that force was pretty much Singleton himself.
Wow.
His far-flung empire kind of crumbled after he stepped away because he hadn't built an enduring management team. He famously defined his job as simply having the freedom to do what seems to me to be in the best interest of the company at any time. The company was him.
Okay, so the study makes a really key distinction here between being rigorous in people decisions and being ruthless. They aren't the same thing.
Not at all. Ruthless means, hacking and cutting, wanton firing, maybe mass layoffs without real strategic thought. Rigorous means consistently applying exacting standards, especially at the top management levels. Making tough calls, but thoughtfully.
Can you give an example of rigor?
Sure. Wells Fargo, when it acquired Crocker Bank, on day one, 1,600 Crocker managers, including almost all the top executives, were let go.
Day one. That sounds pretty ruthless.
It sounds harsh, but the study argues it was rigorous, not ruthless. It was a clear, direct decision to avoid what they called death by 1,000 cuts, prolonged uncertainty. And crucially, Wells Fargo also let go of its own managers if Crocker managers were judged to be better qualified for a specific role.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't just cutting the acquired team. It was about getting the best people in the seats, regardless of where they came from.
Exactly. It was about performance standards. They didn't subject their culture to months or years of confusion. It was Brutally honest, maybe, but it allowed people to move on if they weren't the right fit for Wells Fargo's demanding performance culture. Nucor had a similar kind of rigor with its system, hire 5, work them like 10, and pay them like 8.
Work them like 10, pay them like 8. Sounds intense.
Very intense. It created an environment where hardworking people thrived and lazy workers, well, they either jumped off the bus voluntarily or got thrown off pretty quickly. There was even an extreme case mentioned where workers literally chased a lazy teammate out of the plant with an angle iron.
Whoa. Okay, that's extreme rigor.
Definitely extreme, but the point was, it was about maintaining a culture where only the best, most dedicated could thrive. Rigor, not arbitrary ruthlessness. And it's not just getting the right people on the bus, it's getting the right people in the right seats. That's just as important.
Putting their strengths to best use.
Exactly. Circuit City, under Alan Wurtzel, really focused on building the absolute best, most professional management team in the retail industry, right down to the delivery drivers. Their drivers were professional, clean-shaven, wore uniforms, apparently even earned thank you notes from customers. Silo, its comparison company. They focused purely on growth, opening new stores, but neglected basics like delivery quality. Huge difference in execution.
Details matter.
They really do. Another brilliant example, Joseph F. Coleman III at Philip Morris. He made this seemingly baffling move, took his #1 executive, George Weissman, probably his best guy, and put him in charge of their tiny international operations.
Tiny, why move your best guy there?
Everyone questioned it at the time, but Weissman went on to build Marlboro into the best-selling cigarette globally, even before it became #1 back in the U.S.
Wow, so Coleman saw an opportunity others missed.
He saw an opportunity and put his best person on it. It's a profound example of putting your best people on your best opportunities, not necessarily just on your biggest problems. Similarly, back at Kimberly-Clark, after Darwin Smith sold the paper mills, he kept all the talented paper managers.
Even though they sold the paper business?
Yep. Moved them over to the consumer division. Even though they had little consumer experience, he bet on the people. And Dick Appert, one of those paper executives, famously and proudly supported selling the mills because he saw it was crucial for the company's greatness, not just for his own department's survival. That's putting the enterprise first.
This dedication to the who seems to create a really unique culture within these companies, like a different feel.
Definitely. Philip Morris executives, for example, were described as never agreeing on anything. They'd argue about everything.
Sounds chaotic.
It sounds intense. They'd kill each other and involve everyone, apparently. But, and this is the key, it was always in search of the best answer.
Yeah.
And once a decision was made, everybody stood behind the decision. No passive aggression, no sabotage.
Okay, so intense debate, but unified execution. That's powerful.
Very. George Weissman, the guy who built Marlboro internationally, he described his time at Philip Morris as the passionate love affair of my life, second only to his marriage.
A love affair with his job.
That's what he said, and he felt his colleagues would understand that's a profound connection. Dick Appert at Kimberly-Clark echoed this, saying in 41 years, he never had anyone in Kimberly-Clark say anything unkind to me.
Yeah.
Just good people who respected and admired one another.
Wow. That's the hallmark of getting the who right, isn't it? People genuinely respecting each other, passionate about being part of something first class, a shared purpose.
Exactly. It's not just about skills, it's about character and shared values.
Okay, next up is maybe the most fundamental principle for making any sound decision, whether in business or life. Confront the brutal facts. Breakthrough results, the study says, don't come from ignoring reality or hoping things get better, or from some single miracle stroke. They emerge from a whole series of good decisions diligently executed over time. But you simply cannot make those good decisions without first confronting the brutal facts of your current reality, no matter how unpleasant.
It's like that quote from Fred Perdue at Pitney Bowes.
Yeah, the rock analogy.
Yeah, when you turn over rocks and look at all the squiggly things underneath, you can either put the rock down or you can say, my job is to turn over rocks and look at the squiggly things, even if what you see can scare the hell out of you.
Love that. So how do you actually cultivate that kind of fearless honesty within an organization? Because it's hard, right? People don't like bad news.
It is hard. And it perfectly illustrates the difference between the good to great companies and their comparisons. Consider Kroger versus A&P. Two old-line grocery chains. Both knew the market was changing dramatically. End of the 70s, early 80s. Customers didn't just want basic utilitarian stores anymore. They wanted superstores. Bigger selection, fresh produce, bakeries, maybe banking services, pharmacies.
The whole one-stop shop idea was emerging.
Exactly. AMP, despite knowing this, just clung to the past. The founder, Mr. Hartford, apparently remained the dominant force on the board for nearly 20 years after he died through his foundation.
Wow. Talk about being stuck in the past.
Seriously, they even opened an experimental store called the Golden Key, which customers actually loved. It embodied the new model. But AMP management, they didn't like the answers it gave, so they closed it.
Closed a successful experiment because they didn't like the implications.
Yep. Then they just lurched from one strategy to another, mostly focusing on price cutting without addressing the core customer desire for a better experience. Result: one manager called their stores dirty dirt. They just refused to see what was happening.
Meanwhile, Kroger, facing the exact same brutal truth. What did they do?
Kroger confronted it head on. They systematically rebuilt their entire system on the superstore model, state by state, market by market, pulled out of markets where they couldn't win. They eventually became the #1 grocery chain in the U.S. They understood the old model was going extinct and acted decisively.
It wasn't necessarily a complicated insight, was it? Just accepting reality, however uncomfortable.
That's often the hardest part, accepting reality. You see a similar pattern with Pitney Bowes and Addressograph. Two companies in similar spots, both facing the imminent loss of their near monopolies. Postage meters for Pitney Bowes, address duplicating machines for Addressograph.
Okay, big changes coming for both.
Huge changes. Addressagraph's CEO, Roy Ash, described as a charismatic visionary leader, a conglomerateur. He set this bold vision to take on IBM and Xerox in office automation.
Ambitious.
Very. But he apparently refused to confront the mounting evidence that his plan was doomed to fail. He kept milking the old core business while throwing money after this doomed gambit, denial. Pitney Bowes, on the other hand, cultivated this culture that is very hostile to complacency. Their executives were described as neurotic and compulsive about their market position, always feeling that what we just accomplished is never going to be good enough, constantly paranoid in a productive way.
So one company embraced the fear, the other denied it.
Exactly. And the profound lesson here is that the moment a leader allows himself to become the primary reality people worry about rather than reality being the primary reality, you have a recipe for mediocrity or worse.
So the leader's ego gets in the way of the facts.
Precisely. This might be why less charismatic leaders, the level 5 types, often produce better long-term results. They make reality the star, not themselves.
Okay, so given how painful confronting brutal facts can be, how do you actually create a climate where the truth is heard, even when it's ugly news? The research identified 4 key practices, right?
That's right. 4 things good to great companies did consistently. First, lead with questions, not answers. Alan Wurtzel at Circuit City, when they were facing bankruptcy, he constantly pushed and probed with questions, earned him the nickname the prosecutor.
The prosecutor.
Yeah, but he kept asking, why? Until he truly understood the underlying reality. Apparently, he put more questions to his board than they put to him. And crucially, good to great leaders used questions purely to gain understanding, not for manipulation or, blaming people.
Okay, lead with questions. What's second?
Second, engage in dialogue and debate, not coercion. This contrasts with comparison companies where executives often just preached their view. Good to great companies fostered vigorous debate. People would pound on tables, raise voices, get heated.
Sounds intense again.
But it was always in search of the best answer. It was about collective learning and finding the truth, not about one person winning the argument or imposing their will.
Makes sense. Third practice?
Third, conduct autopsies without blame. When Philip Morris made that acquisition of 7-Up and it turned into a financial loss, a visible black eye for them, they didn't bury it. Executives talked about it openly. Joe Coleman, the CEO, dedicated 5 pages in his memoir to a clinical analysis of the mistake. And importantly, he pointed the finger squarely at himself and credited those within the company who had actually been prescient, who had warned against it.
Taking responsibility. Learning from failure.
Exactly. It fosters a culture of learning and accountability rather than a culture of fear where mistakes get hidden.
Okay. And the fourth practice?
Fourth, build red flag mechanisms.
Red flag mechanisms, like ways to force issues out into the open.
Precisely. Systems that make it impossible to ignore the truth. The book mentions a system used at Stanford Business School where a student could raise a physical red sheet of paper at any time. That stopped the class. And the student could voice any observation or disagreement without penalty. It forced the professor to confront immediate, unavoidable truth about their own teaching right there and then. Or another example, Granorock, a company that had this short pay-as system. Customers had full discretionary power to decide how much to pay on an invoice based purely on their satisfaction.
Wow, customers decide what to pay. That's brave.
Very brave. But it was a powerful mechanism that directly exposed any problems with quality or service. Negative information could not be ignored. The goal is to make it impossible systemically to hide from reality.
This all leads us to a really powerful psychological duality that seems to define these great companies. The Stockdale paradox.
Ah, yes, Admiral Stockdale.
Named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, right? Highest-ranking U.S. prisoner of war in Vietnam. Survived 8 years of torture and confinement. And he said he survived by holding two seemingly contradictory beliefs at the same time.
That's the core of it. You must retain faith that you will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties. And you must also confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be.
Faith in facts, not just blind faith.
Exactly. Stockdale observed that it was the optimists, the ones who kept saying, we'll be out by Christmas, then Christmas would pass, we'll be out by Easter, Easter would pass. They were the ones who died of broken hearts. They couldn't face the brutal reality of the situation, so the disappointment crushed them.
And this paradox, this duality, was evident in every single good to great company.
Every single one. Think about Fannie Mae losing that $1 million a day. Maxwell and his team never entertained the possibility that we would fail. Unshakable faith. But simultaneously, they fully embraced the brutal fact of their exposure to interest rate risk, which was killing them. They didn't just survive by hoping rates would change. They rebuilt their entire business model around sophisticated mortgage finance instruments to manage that risk. They became, as the book says, something much stronger and more powerful, like the $6 million man analogy. They rebuilt themselves based on the brutal facts.
So it wasn't just survival, it was transformation fueled by realism.
Exactly. Every good to great company, whether facing takeovers like Gillette, intense import pressures like Nucor, deregulation like Wells Fargo, major product recalls like Abbott, they all responded with this duality. Unwavering faith in their ultimate triumphs, coupled with a relentless confrontation of the harsh realities.
It seems like this ability to hold both faith and brutal facts allows leaders to cut through the noise.
Yes. To strip away so much noise and clutter and just focus on the few things that would have the greatest impact. Ultimately, the research suggests greatness is largely a matter of conscious choice, choosing to face reality and believe in a better future simultaneously.
Okay, so we've got the right people on the bus, we're confronting the brutal facts, holding on to faith. Now, how do you focus all that energy? How do you find a clear direction? The good to great companies found their guiding concept in this surprisingly simple idea based on Isaiah Berlin's parable, the hedgehog and the fox.
Right. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing.
So foxes are cunning, scattered, pursuing lots of different goals, seeing complexity everywhere.
Hedgehogs, on the other hand, they simplify a complex world into a single unifying idea, a basic principle that guides everything they do.
They aren't simpletons, though. It's about piercing insight.
Exactly. They see what is truly essential and ignore the rest. Think of Freud and the unconscious, Darwin and natural selection, Einstein and relativity, Adam Smith and the division of labor. They were all hedgehogs. They found their one big thing.
And this one big thing for the good to great companies, it coalesced into what the research calls the Hedgehog Concept.
That's right. It's a simple but deeply insightful frame of reference for basically all decisions, and breakthrough results consistently coincided with the company gaining this understanding. The Hedgehog Concept sits right at the intersection of three overlapping circles, three key questions they had to answer.
Okay, what are the three circles?
First circle, what can you be the best in the world at? And this is critical. It's not just what you want to be good at or even what you are good at now. It's what you can realistically, potentially be the very best at.
The best. That's a high bar.
It is. It demands piercing insight and egoless clarity. You have to be brutally honest with yourself about your capabilities and the potential for true excellence. For example, Wells Fargo realized they couldn't be the best global bank competing with Citicorp everywhere. It just wasn't realistic. So they focused instead on becoming the best at running a bank, like a business, focused specifically on the Western United States. That, they decided, they could be the best in the world at. Abbott Labs, similarly, realized they probably couldn't be the absolute best broad-based pharmaceutical company anymore, so they shifted focus to areas where they could be best, like creating hospital nutritional products and diagnostic devices, essentially, cost-effective healthcare products. They carved out a niche of excellence.
Okay, what can we be best at? What's the second circle?
The second circle is what drives your economic engine. This means identifying the single most important economic denominator, the profit per X, or maybe cash flow per X in the social sector, that has the greatest and most sustainable impact on your economics. One key ratio.
Profit per X. Can you give an example?
Sure. Walgreens is a great one. They shifted their focus from the standard retail metric of profit per store to profit per customer visit.
Profit per customer visit. How did that change things?
Dramatically. This simple shift allowed them, even encouraged them, to invest in super convenient but often very expensive corner locations. They started clustering stores, sometimes 9 stores within a mile, because more convenient locations meant more customer visits, which drove their key metric, and overall profitability soared.
Ah, the metric drove the strategy.
Exactly. Wells Fargo, facing deregulation, realized old metrics like profit per loan were obsolete. They identified profit per employee as their key driver. That insight led to innovations like stripped-down branches, focusing on ATMs, anything to maximize per employee productivity and efficiency. Fannie Mae grasped the really subtle insight of profit per mortgage risk level, not just profit per mortgage. That allowed them to build a whole business around understanding and managing mortgage risk. And Nucor, in the brutal steel industry, focused on profit per ton of finished steel. That single number perfectly reflected their unique blend of frugal culture and manufacturing technology.
So the denominator isn't always obvious. It requires real insight into the core economics.
Deep insight, identifying that single lever that matters most.
Okay, best in the world, economic engine.
What's the third circle?
The third circle is, what are you deeply passionate about? And this isn't about trying to stimulate passion artificially. It's about discovering what genuinely ignites passion within the organization already. It has to be authentic.
Passion for the work itself. Yes. Even if the work isn't glamorous. Philip Morris is a fascinating example. Despite having, sinful products like cigarettes and beer, their executives apparently had tremendous, almost evangelical passion for the business. They described themselves as fiercely independent cowboys fighting for individual rights, including the right to smoke.
Finding meaning even there.
Right. This contrasted sharply with R.J. Reynolds, their comparison company, which diversified heavily away from tobacco because they just saw it as a way to make money, lacking that core passion. They ultimately lost focus. Gillette similarly found its passion. Executives noted people who aren't passionate about Gillette need not apply. It's about finding that shared intrinsic drive that fuels the organization beyond just the paycheck.
So how do companies actually find this hedgehog concept, these 3 overlapping circles? Is it like a weekend retreat, an aha moment?
Almost never. The research showed it's not a single aha moment or some sudden revelation, no bolt of lightning. It's an iterative process. It takes time. It involves asking persistent questions, engaging in that vigorous dialogue and debate we talked about, making decisions, and then conducting autopsies on the results, all guided by those 3 circles. You try things, see if they fit, learn, adjust, try again.
An ongoing conversation.
Exactly. The research highlights the importance of having what they call the council, basically, a group of the right people, those level 5 types, and the right folks on the bus, who engage in this iterative dialogue over months, even years. It's through that ongoing, disciplined conversation that the deep, unifying insight truly emerges.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think, for you, our listener. Every single one of the good to great companies found a hedgehog concept.
Every single one.
Even if they started out, as the book says, not the best at anything, and showed no prospects of becoming so.
That's right. They were infused with that Stockdale paradox we discussed, that unwavering faith that there must be something we can become the best at, and we will find it, coupled with the brutal honesty about what they couldn't be the best at.
This universal applicability is pretty powerful. It suggests that no matter how mediocre your starting point, a hedgehog concept is discoverable for pretty much any organization striving for greatness.
It's out there to be found.
So what's your organization's one big thing? Where do those 3 circles overlap for you? Now let's talk about execution, because having a clear concept, that hedgehog idea, is one thing. Making it happen consistently day in, day out, that's another challenge entirely. The good at great companies didn't achieve their amazing results through, say, more bureaucracy or rigid top-down control. That wasn't it. Instead, they fostered a culture of discipline.
That's the key phrase. George Rathman, who co-founded Amgen, learned a valuable lesson from Abbott Labs early on. Bureaucracy is really just a way to compensate for incompetence and lack of discipline. If you have the right people on the bus, as we discussed earlier, then discipline can largely replace the need for layers of rules, procedures, and stifling hierarchy. The right people discipline themselves.
So discipline plus?
Discipline combined with an ethic of entrepreneurship, that creates this sort of magical alchemy. When you get that combination right, you get superior performance and sustained results. It's about having freedom and responsibility within a framework.
Freedom and responsibility within a framework. Can you give an analogy?
Sure, the book uses the airline pilot analogy. Think about it. A pilot operates within an incredibly strict, highly developed system, right? Pre-flight checklists, air traffic control, precise procedures for everything. You absolutely do not want your pilot to suddenly experiment, to be creative, to be entrepreneurial outside that established framework during flight.
Definitely not.
But the crucial decisions, whether to take off in bad weather, whether to land, whether to abort a landing, those rest entirely with the pilot. Ultimate responsibility within the system. Good to great companies embody this. They give people freedom and responsibility, but within a clear framework of rigorous standards and a deep understanding of the Hedgehog concept.
Circuit City seems like a good example of this framework in action.
Yeah, they became, as the book puts it, what McDonald's became to restaurants. Not necessarily the most exquisite experience, but an enormously consistent one.
Predictable, reliable.
Exactly. They could stamp these stores out all over the country with great consistency. And that disciplined execution of their concept led directly to those phenomenal 18x market returns. Consistency paid off. The study called this kind of extreme, consistent discipline the rinsing your cottage cheese factor.
Rinsing your cottage cheese. What on earth does that mean?
It's a bizarre but really memorable analogy from Dave Scott, the Ironman triathlete, won it 6 times. Despite burning something like 5,000 calories a day during training, he would literally rinse his cottage cheese.
Why? To remove extra fat.
Yep, to remove a little extra fat.
Burning 5,000 calories a day. Did that tiny amount of fat even matter?
Probably not directly to winning, no. But the point wasn't whether he had to do it. It was a symbol. It was one more small, consistent act of discipline added to all the hundreds of others that contributed to achieving super discipline. Going beyond what was merely sufficient? It's about that mindset.
You see this vividly in the contrast between Carl Reichardt at Wells Fargo and the executives at Bank of America during the crisis years.
Oh yeah, stark difference. Reichardt, a classic level 5 leader, led by example with intense focus on cost and efficiency. He froze executive salaries for 2 years, shut the fancy executive dining room, sold the corporate jets, even banned potted plants from executive suites because they were too expensive to water.
Banned plants? That's frugal.
Extremely. He'd apparently sit in meetings picking at the stuffing coming out of his old beat-up chair while executives were proposing spending money, sending a clear message. Meanwhile, at Bank of America, even when they were in crisis, losing over $1 billion, their executives kept their posh executive kingdom intact. Oriental rugs, sweeping panoramas from their high-rise HQ described as floating above the fog in an elevated city of alien elites.
Wow, what a contrast in culture and discipline.
Profound difference. It demonstrates that rinsing your cottage cheese mentality, embodying the discipline, not just talking about it or imposing it only on others. And it's really important to clarify again, this is about the discipline of thought and disciplined people. It's not about having a disciplinarian leader who imposes rules from the top through sheer force of will.
Like a tyrant.
Right. Leaders like Ray McDonald at Burroughs or Lee Iacocca at Chrysler, they certainly impose discipline through their personality. But their companies faltered after they lost focus or left because the discipline wasn't deeply embedded in the culture itself. It was tied too much to their individual presence. It has to become self-sustaining.
So the discipline needs to be connected to the hedgehog concept, right? Sticking to those 3 circles.
Absolutely. Good to great companies showed fanatical consistency within their 3 circles. Pitney Bowes, for example, successfully navigated the loss of its postage meter monopoly and went on to outperform Coca-Cola, 3M, and GE by sticking rigorously to its redefined hedgehog concept in mail and document management. Conversely, R.J. Reynolds, facing anti-tobacco pressure, reacted by wildly diversifying into totally unrelated areas: shipping, oil. They bought Sealand, the container shipping giant, for billions, then sold it later at a huge loss.
Chasing growth outside their core.
Exactly. Deviating completely from their historical core competence. Philip Morris, despite facing the same societal pressures, stuck much closer to its consumer products core, including tobacco, and significantly outperformed R.J. Reynolds. The insight here is really crucial. The more an organization has the discipline to stay within its three circles, the more it will have attractive opportunities for growth.
Counterintuitive. Staying focused creates more opportunity.
Yes, because you get so good within your domain, you attract the best opportunities. It becomes about opportunity selection, not opportunity creation. Choosing the right opportunities that fit your hedgehog, rather than desperately chasing every shiny object that comes along. Nucor provides another really powerful example of this disciplined culture. They built this unique egalitarian meritocracy, all focused on producing low-cost steel. Executives at Nucor actually received fewer perks than the frontline workers. No corporate dining room visiting dignitaries ate at Phil's Diner across the street.
Seriously.
Yeah.
No executive dining room.
None. And in recessions, worker pay might go down 25%, but officer pay dropped 60%, and the CEO's pay plummeted 75%. Shared sacrifice.
Wow. Skin in the game.
Absolutely. All 7,000 employees' names appeared in the annual report. Everyone wore the same color hard hats, green ones. Status came from leadership and contribution, not fancy perks or titles. This intense alignment of interests fostered extreme discipline. Everyone felt the impact of performance, good or bad, and shared the responsibility for success.
And you mentioned something earlier. A crucial but often overlooked aspect of discipline, the stop doing list.
Ah, yes, the stop doing list. So important. Most of us focus on our endless to-do lists, but good to great companies made just as much use of stop doing lists, actively deciding what not to do anymore. Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark, for instance, stopped requiring annual budgets and forecasts because he felt they drove short-term thinking. He also unplugged formal titles to try and reduce class consciousness, aiming for a flatter, more merit-based environment.
So having the discipline to stop doing things that don't fit or are counterproductive, not just adding more initiatives.
Exactly. It's about pruning as much as planting.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly now and talk about technology's role in all this, because the study have a really crucial and maybe counterintuitive finding here that might surprise a lot of people. Technology, it turns out, is an accelerator, not an igniter.
That's the key phrase, accelerator, not igniter.
What exactly does that mean?
It means that no technology, no matter how amazing or disruptive, not computers, not telecommunications, robotics, the internet, AI, whatever comes next, none of it can, by itself, ignite a shift from good to great. Technology can, however, dramatically accelerate momentum after the hedgehog concept is clear, after you have the right people on the bus, and after you have that culture of discipline in place.
So it's not the starting point. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire that's already burning.
That's a great way to put it. It amplifies what's already working. It doesn't create the initial spark.
Can you give an example, maybe with the internet boom?
Sure. When the dot-com bubble was inflating like crazy, and everyone was in this frantic rush to get online or be declared obsolete, Walgreens took a very different approach. They adopted what the book calls a crawl, walk, run approach to the internet, calm equanimity. They actually paused to reflect carefully on how the internet fit their specific hedgehog concept. Remember, convenience and profit per customer visit.
They didn't just jump on the bandwagon.
Not at all. And interestingly, their CIO at the time was a former pharmacist, not some tech guru brought in from Silicon Valley. That tells you a lot about their priorities. Walgreens actually had a long history of pioneering technology, like their satellite network connecting pharmacies in the 80s, scanners, robotics, but it was always tightly linked to their core strategy, their hedgehog. If a technology didn't clearly serve that purpose, they largely ignored the hype, were just aimed for parity, not leadership. They weren't swayed by fads.
Okay, so they weren't anti-technology, just very selective and strategic about it.
Exactly. Good to great companies were often pioneers, but pioneers in the application of carefully selected technologies that link directly to their hedgehog concept. Kroger, for instance, was an early actor of barcode scanners. Why? Because it freed up hundreds of millions of dollars tied up in inventory.
Cash they could then use for
reinvesting in building their superstores, which was their hedgehog. The scanners accelerated the core strategy. Gillette pioneered laser welding on a mass scale for its advanced shaving systems, a technology usually reserved for high-tech things like heart pacemakers. This gave them huge proprietary manufacturing advantages, directly supporting their best-in-the-world aspirations in shaving. Fannie Mae, after its main transformation, used sophisticated computer modeling and analytical programs for mortgage risk as a second wind, significantly accelerating its momentum and profitability. But the tech followed the strategy.
So the common thread is
Yeah.
disciplined people leading to disciplined thought, leading to disciplined action, even when it comes to adopting new technology.
Precisely. They weren't driven by a fear of being left behind technologically. They were driven by a deep, clear understanding of their hedgehog concept. They used technology as a tool, strategically, to accelerate what they were already focused on becoming the best at. If a technology didn't fit squarely within their 3 circles, they just ignored the hype, ignored the breathless articles, and went about their business with remarkable calmness. They were in control of the technology, not the other way around.
Let's challenge another common myth now.
Mhm.
The miracle moment. We often think, or maybe hope, that transformations from good to great happen in one fell swoop. One big defining action, a killer new product launch, a brilliant acquisition.
Yeah, the dramatic breakthrough narrative. We love those stories.
We do. But the research found the exact opposite. There was no single defining action, no grand program launch that changed everything overnight, no one killer innovation, no solitary lucky break, no miracle moment.
None. It just didn't happen that way for any of them.
So if it wasn't a sudden spark, what was it? How did that massive change actually feel from the inside?
Well, the process, according to the research, resembled relentlessly pushing a giant, heavy flywheel.
A flywheel, like in an engine.
Exactly. Imagine this huge, heavy metal disc, maybe mounted horizontally. Getting it started takes immense effort. That first push barely moves it. You keep pushing consistently in one direction. Turn upon turn, it's hard work, doesn't feel like much is happening initially, but gradually it starts to build momentum, it gets easier to push, it spins faster and faster, until eventually, breakthrough. It gains so much momentum, its own weight starts working for you. It flies forward almost unstoppable.
So it's an accumulation of effort, lots of small pushes adding up.
Precisely. An accumulation of consistent pushes, small and large, all adding up over time, creating this powerful, unstoppable force that's how good to great felt from the inside. Circuit City's supposed overnight success, it was more than a decade in the making. Years of experimenting, refining their showroom format, push after push on the flywheel. Kimberly-Clark's full transformation after selling its mills. That took 21 years of thousands of additional pushes, accumulating momentum piece by piece, turn by turn. There was no big announcement, no fanfare at the beginning.
Yeah.
They just quietly began to spin the flywheel, understanding the brutal facts, getting the right who, clarifying the hedgehog, instilling discipline, step after step after step.
And this wasn't just something they could afford to do because times were good, right? This flywheel model worked even when things were tough.
Absolutely critical point. This wasn't a luxury of circumstance. It worked even in the most dire situations. Fannie Mae was losing $1 million a day when they started pushing. Nucor was facing near bankruptcy. Gillette was fighting off hostile takeovers. Abbott Labs even had these things called BLE plans. Internal plans to systematically invest in future projects even when facing short-term Wall Street pressure. They would essentially hold back some actual growth potential from analysts' view, channeling those funds into long-term flywheel building. They prioritized the long-term buildup over short-term accolades, and the power of visible results here cannot be overstated. As the flywheel starts to turn, even slowly at first, people notice. When people, both inside and outside the company, start to see and feel the buildup of momentum, they line up with enthusiasm. It becomes magnetic.
Success breeds success.
In a way, yes. When the right people see a simple, coherent plan, born of confronting those brutal facts that just flat out works, they're much more likely to get on board and say, yeah, that'll work. Count me in. Let's push this thing together. Nucor, for instance, only publicly aimed to become the #1 most profitable steel company in America after they had been building momentum and seeing consistent results for a decade. The results themselves create the alignment and motivation. It's a virtuous cycle.
This flywheel concept stands in really stark contrast to what the research called the doom loop. Sounds ominous.
It is. The comparison companies, the ones that failed to become great or stay great, they often fell into this destructive cycle.
What does the doom loop look like?
It typically starts with reaction without understanding. Facing pressure, they react impulsively. This leads to grasping for a quick fix, a new direction, program, leader, event, or fad. Something dramatic to shake things up.
A silver bullet attempt.
Exactly. But because it's not grounded in deep understanding or built on prior momentum, the result is no buildup, no accumulated momentum. The flywheel gets stopped or even thrown in reverse. Think about Warner Lambert. The study showed how each new CEO came in with their own brand new program, a major restructuring, big layoffs, constantly halting whatever momentum their predecessor might have started building.
So lots of frantic activity, but no forward progress.
Precisely. Bursts of initial results, maybe followed by disappointment. It's like constantly starting new sprint instead of patiently building up endurance for the marathon. Two common patterns really drove this doom loop. First, the misguided use of acquisitions. Comparison companies often try to buy their way to growth or desperately create momentum through big acquisitions before they truly understood their own hedgehog concept.
Trying to buy greatness instead of building it.
Right. And the study found unequivocally that two big mediocrities joined together never make one great company. It just creates a bigger mediocrity. R.J. Reynolds buying that shipping company, Sealand. Warner Lambert making expensive, failed acquisitions before clarifying their core business. Classic doom loop acquisitions. The second pattern was leaders who actively stop the flywheel. New leaders come in, dismiss the previous direction, maybe because it wasn't their idea, and abruptly throw the company in an entirely new direction, undoing years of work.
Like Harris Corporation, mentioned in the book, or Warner Lambert's constant cycle of restructurings.
Exactly. These cycles with the new programs, the layoffs, the dashed hopes, they created bursts of activity, maybe some short-term stock bumps, but absolutely no sustained momentum. Ultimately, it led to stagnation, decline, or being acquired. You have to build momentum turn by turn. You can't short-circuit the flywheel.
So we've covered the key steps, the physics of making that leap from good to great, building the flywheel. But what about enduring greatness? How do you keep that flywheel spinning for decades, maybe even centuries? Become truly iconic? This brings us to the connection between this research and the work from an earlier book by Jim Collins, Built to Last.
Right. They're related but distinct. Good to great is about how you make that initial leap, how you build the flywheel to achieve sustained great results over 15+ years. Built to Last explores what comes next, how you take those great results and transform into an enduring, truly iconic company that lasts for generations, like an extra dimension beyond just great performance.
Okay, so what is that extra dimension needed for enduring greatness, according to the research?
The key difference identified in Built to Last is having a guiding philosophy, or what they called a core ideology. This core ideology consists of two parts: core values, the essential, timeless tenets of the organization, and a core purpose, the organization's fundamental reason for being, beyond just making money. This core ideology is then combined with a relentless drive for progress, what they termed the dynamic of preserve the core, stimulate progress.
Preserve the core A&D, stimulate progress, hold on to your values, but constantly change and adapt everything else.
That's the essence of it. You see this in companies studied and built to last, like Walmart. Sam Walton's overnight success was actually 25 years in the making, building incrementally, turn by turn, before hitting breakthrough momentum with his discount mart concept. Or Hewlett-Packard. Founded on that first Who principle, Bill Hewlett and David Packard just wanted to build a great company together, then figure out what to manufacture.
They started with the Who.
Absolutely. They hired fabulous people even when they didn't have specific jobs for them yet. They were consummate level 5 leaders. Think about Packard's incredibly humble grave inscription. David Packard, 1912, 1996, rancher, etc., etc. HP's core values included things like technical contribution, respect for the individual, and this belief that profit isn't the fundamental goal, but an essential byproduct of doing other things well.
You see it too in Merck, right, with the river blindness drug.
Classic example. Merck developed a drug, Mectizan, that could cure river blindness, a horrible disease affecting millions in impoverished areas. When they realized the people who needed it couldn't possibly afford it and no government or aid agency would fund it, Merck decided to give the drug away free, forever, to anyone who needed it. Millions cured.
That's clearly a purpose beyond just maximizing profit.
Unquestionably. Or Walt Disney. Their core purpose, maybe something like to bring happiness to millions, especially children, has endured across decades, across national borders. Meanwhile, their strategies, animated films, theme parks, TV shows, streaming have constantly changed and adapted. That's preserving the core while stimulating progress. It's about knowing what should never change and what must always change. And this framework also helps clarify the role of BHA's big, hairy, audacious goals from Built to Last.
Right, those huge, daunting, clear goals, like the 1960s NASA mission to the moon.
Exactly. A good BHA, one that truly works, must be rooted in deep understanding. Specifically, it should align with the company's hedgehog concept. It's not just some arbitrary, ambitious goal pulled out of thin air. It has to connect to what you can be best at, what drives your economics, and what you're passionate about. When it's aligned like that, a BHA becomes a powerful way to galvanize people and focus effort on building meaningful momentum on the flywheel, rather than just being a disconnected, potentially demoralizing stretch target.
Okay, after diving into all of this level 5, first 2, brutal facts, hedgehog, discipline, flywheel, built to last, a really natural question might bubble up for you, our listener. Why? Why bother pursuing greatness at all? It sounds like a lot of hard work. It doesn't depend on size, clearly.
Yeah.
You can have a great small enterprise, like that example of Sina Salmantab's single commercial building generating the highest profit per square foot in his town. Greatness isn't just about scale. It's not just about being successful in conventional terms either. So, why greatness? Why strive for that level?
Well, the counterintuitive answer from the research, and one I personally find really compelling, is this. Pursuing greatness, especially using these evidence-based ideas, is actually no more painful or exhausting than those who settle for just letting things wallow along in mind-numbing mediocrity.
Really, it's not harder to be great than just good.
Maybe not in terms of overall energy expenditure. In fact, the research suggests it often involves less suffering and can actually be more fun. Because the very act of building momentum, of making progress on the flywheel, it adds more energy back into the system than it takes out. People get energized by tangible progress and being part of a winning team. Perpetuating mediocrity, on the other hand, that's inherently depressing. It drains energy. It's a fundamentally different, often more exhausting experience.
Okay, that's one answer. It might actually be less draining. But is there a deeper reason?
I think there is. The deeper answer, the real heart of it all, seems to be connected to the fundamental human search for meaningful work. The book uses this great analogy of a high school cross-country team. The head coach built the team into something truly great, winning championships. But her goal wasn't initially the state championship. The kids actually discovered that goal themselves, fueled by the momentum they built. Her driving force was that she really cared about running and its positive impact on the kids. She wanted them to have a great experience and to have the experience of being part of something absolutely first class for its own sake.
Doing something well.
Yeah.
Because it's worth doing well.
Exactly. And the first who principle was even applied there too. Her assistant coach was apparently a 300-pound ex-shot putter who knew nothing about running initially, but he shared her core values about kids and effort. They built something special together because they cared. And you see this with the level 5 leaders too. They are driven by passion for what they are doing. Whether it's Bill Hewlett wanting to create a company with lasting technical impact, or Ken Iverson wanting to obliterate class hierarchies at Nucor, or Darwin Smith pursuing this deep inner quest for excellence against the odds. Or maybe just genuinely loving the business itself, like the Philip Morris folks seem to. Passion is key. It doesn't have to be some grand, save-the-world reason. It just has to be genuine and deeply felt. So ultimately, the question isn't really why greatness. If you're doing something you genuinely love and care about, striving to make it the best it can possibly be becomes almost tautological. It's just a given. It's what you do.
Which leads us to our final thought for you, our listeners, you reflect on all this. The research suggests that the biggest danger in business, and maybe even in life, apart from outright failure, is to be successful, but without being resolutely clear about why you were successful in the first place, lacking that hedgehog clarity. So how might you apply these insights? Level 5, first 2, brutal facts, hedgehog, discipline, flywheel, to gain clarity about your own success or your path towards greatness, whether that's in an organization you lead or belong to, or perhaps even in your personal life. Remember, the research also suggests it's not necessarily the specific content of your values or your hedgehog that matters most, but the strength of conviction and the discipline with which you hold them and live them that truly distinguishes the great from the good. And that, deep divers, brings us to the close of another journey into the building blocks of excellence. We've unpacked the paradox of level 5 leadership, humility plus will, the counterintuitive wisdom of prioritizing first who, then what, the absolute necessity of confronting the brutal facts while keeping faith.
We explored the focusing power of the hedgehog concept, finding the intersection of what you can be best at, what drives your economics, and what you're passionate about. We saw the importance of a culture of discipline, not bureaucracy.
Right, and how technology acts only as an accelerator of existing momentum, not an igniter. We contrasted the relentless cumulative power of the flywheel effect with the reactive, chaotic energy of the doom loop.
And finally, we connected it all back to the pursuit of enduring greatness through core ideology and ultimately to the human search for meaningful work.
As you go forward from here, we really encourage you to reflect on your own bus. Who's on it? Are they the right people? Are they in the right seats?
What's your potential hedgehog concept? Where do your three circles overlap? And where can you apply consistent, disciplined action, rinsing your own cottage cheese, perhaps to truly start building momentum on your flywheel?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparks some insights.
It's been a pleasure exploring these powerful ideas.
Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep striving for greatness, whatever that means to you.